Hey garden friends, it's Landon Gilfillan here at Little Pine Farm, formerly Pepper and Pine Garden Design. And I know it's been a while since we've been on camera, and honestly that's just because we have been busy working in this garden and getting things managed and in the ground, and just lots of things going on this year, especially since we're doing the farmers market this year in our first year of a farm share, or a CSA, whichever term you know it as. So I thought I would come out and just bring you with me in the garden today, because there's just some things that need to get done, and I thought I would just kind of tell you what we're up to and what's going on, and yeah, just touch base. So right now I'm in the tomato trellis, or the tomato garden, what I call the warm season garden, because I've got my tomatoes and my eggplants and my peppers and summer squash and potatoes are all in this side of the garden. And what I'm doing right now, and I'm going to talk to you while I'm doing it, is I'm trellising these tomatoes. This year we chose to use cattle panels as our trellises just because they're very sturdy, they last forever. Even if we choose not to use them next year as trellises, they're so sturdy that we could, they will go for years to come. And so this year we're doing them for trellises because we're growing so many tomatoes and we need something really sturdy to hold them up. We've used other things in the past, and by the end of the season with these 8 and 9 foot tomato, they're falling over, they're coming apart from the T-posts. And in the past, when I've used these for a much smaller garden, they worked really well. So we made the investment and did cattle panels this year. Next year we may try something called a Florida weave, which I learned about like the evening that we put these up. And I've seen since then a couple other market farmers use the Florida weave, where you've got these T-posts or posts, every 5 to 8 feet down the row, and you weave the twine between the tomato plants as they grow. And that might be something that we can use down the road, and then save these cattle panels for something like a hoop house, which is another thing that we're discussing. So you never know how things are going to go from year to year, but my point is that I know that these cattle panels will be useful throughout the years. So it was a good investment regardless of how we use them. So we did finally get the trellises up. I believe it was last week, and we have them about 2.5 to 3 feet off the ground. Actually, this is the bottom of the trellis. So the tomato plants are already large enough that they're starting to fall over before they reach the bottom of the trellis. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this twine and I am trellising them up to the bottom of the cattle panel to keep them upright and support them until I'm able to actually trellis them to the panel. And the reason I did that is because I wanted the height up above. I didn't want to have to do 2 panels up, and I didn't want the tomato plants falling over the top. So it's much easier to trellis them up to the bottom of the panel using something like twine than trying to do it once we get 6 and 7 feet off the ground. So that actually has worked really well. It's a bit tedious to come out here and trellis these tomato plants, but I'm only doing like 5 to 10 at a time. As they get big enough, I'll come out here, see one falling over, trellis it up. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm trellising up these tomatoes, cutting off suckers. If you're familiar with suckers, they're the little growth that happens between the main stem and the branch of the tomato plant. You'll have these little shoots coming up right there in what I call the armpit of the tomato. And those will basically create a whole new stem, a whole new branch that you can grow tomatoes off of. Some people like them, some people don't. I kind of fall right in the middle. I feel like if you let your suckers go uncontrolled, you'll have a huge, crazy tomato plant that feels really unmanageable. Some people like them because they help you produce more fruit. So I kind of fall in the middle, where I will cut off all suckers up to about 2.5 feet of the plant. So I'll show you here in a second. I will trim or prune the tomato to have one main branch up to about 2.5 feet. And then at that point, I'll kind of hit or miss with suckers. I'll let some go and I'll cut some, really just depending on how bushy and crazy the plant's getting, how manageable it is for me to trellis it up, how much space I have between the plants. Because if you don't have a lot of airflow, you're going to be dealing with fungal issues or mildew. So I don't want to let all suckers grow because you'll just have this huge crazy plant. But if you don't have that many tomato plants and you have the space and the bandwidth to deal with a big crazy plant like that, go for it. But when I've got this many plants growing, 90 some odd tomato plants, it's really a lot more manageable for me to come out here and trim most of the suckers off, just to keep things manageable in the garden. The other thing I do is I trim off a lot of these branches that are touching the ground. Now we're using silage tarps this year, so in theory they're actually touching the silage tarps, but I have found that that really helps to manage any sort of disease that tomato plants can get if you can keep their leaves off the ground. Backsplash from rain or watering in general, unless you're using, a soaker system, that will just keep your plant healthier in general, to keep the leaves off the ground, and again, to help create airflow around the branches and around the plants. So I am out here pruning and trellising these tomato plants today. So just so you can see what I'm seeing, here is the main branch that you can see I've pruned off all these branches. Now I do it as it grows. So as it grows, I'll trim from the bottom. I don't want to do a huge pruning all at once. That'll cause stress on the plant. So as they're growing, I'll come in here and trim off the suckers and the branches. And then I have this one nice strong main stem. And as you can see here, it branches to two stems. I have this stem here and this stem over here. And then one of these, this one right here, was a sucker. So this sucker was allowed to grow. I probably missed it. And you see how it's become a whole nother stem of the plant. So it'll produce more fruit, more suckers. There's a little sucker right there. I'm trying to get my camera to focus right there. So I might allow two main branches like this, but if I have too many of them, these plants can become huge and unmanageable. And again, depending on if it's a cherry tomato or a beefsteak tomato, I might want all the energy to go into just a few big fruit. But if it's a cherry tomato, I might want it to go into producing as many cherry tomatoes as possible. It kind of depends on your goals for that individual plant, whether or not you decide to prune the suckers or keep them. But as you can see down the row, I've got the base of the cattle panel here, and I'm just using this twine to hold up the branches until they reach tall enough for me to trellis them to the panel. And you can see down there, I've got a few that are finally reaching up, so I can start trellising them to the actual panel. Okay, so now I am in the broccoli patch, and without fail, every year, broccoli and cabbages are just some of the hardest plants to keep clean of pests. The cabbage worms and I just dropped the name of the other caterpillar that just decimate brassicas are so frustrating, especially when you're trying to grow organically and not spray your plants. I do spray with BT, which is a bacteria that will kill those soft-shelled, not even shelled, soft-skinned things like worms and caterpillars. And I have done that, and maybe it's helped, but I still am battling a lot of caterpillars. And you guys are gonna have to excuse my hair. It's hot and sweaty out here, and I am just in the thick of it. But anyway, I'm over here looking at these plants, and it's been a battle from the beginning, trying to keep these clean. And I actually had to just pull some plants because there's just too much damage for me to feel like it's worth trying to come back on that plant. Now some of these still look great. It's like the bugs are just attacking certain ones, so I'm pulling those certain ones. But we're probably on wave 3 of caterpillars here. So the first wave are the big fat green caterpillars that they're not as prolific, they're easier to see, they're usually on the top of the leaves, and I just pick them off and smash them. And then spray around for any eggs or anything like that. And those are coming from those white moths that you'll see flying around the garden this time of year. And so I've kept those for the most part at bay, but even though I have this insect netting on top of my brassicas, I am still finding moths and caterpillars in here. And I think I either missed the window, which is probably what happened. I missed the window of getting those covers on, and the eggs have just been cycling through. And I even think that some of these caterpillars have chrysalis, and birthed into moths, and that's the moths that I'm finding trapped in here in the mornings. So anyway, all to say, they're just really hard to keep out of the garden. So moving forward next year, I already have my netting. So as soon as those things are planted in the ground, I'm just going to have to put on the covers. And the other trick that I've discovered this year is not only do you have to put on those insect nettings, you have to cover the sides with dirt to make sure that nothing is getting in, because something is still getting in here, because now we're on wave 3 of caterpillars, and it's a different kind of caterpillar. And this particular kind, which again, I'll have to look up the name because I've forgotten it. These are like white in their larvae stage, and then they start getting like green or black stripes on them. These, in my opinion, are much worse. They're more prolific, they're harder to find. Here's one I'll show you. And they just tear up your plants. So again, I'll have to look up the name, but this is one of them right here. This is the older stage where they have the yellow on the sides and the gray on the back, and they are just very prolific. And actually, generally you find them on the back side. So I'm sorry if you're an animal lover, I am going to kill this thing because they will just continue to reproduce. And a lot of times I'll just take the whole plant or the whole leaf off and go feed it to the chickens, because there's so many on here. I cannot kill all of them. But that one was just one. But you can see that this plant is pretty beat up. So here's another one right here. And I guarantee you there's another one. So this whole plant, it looks really bad. So I'm going to gently pull it out and hope not to drop some of those caterpillars on the ground. And this is going to the chickens. So overall, this patch looks pretty good. I mean, I've got some really nice leaves in here. You know, this one's been chomped around the edges. But this is something that my family could use because I'm not so concerned about that. But the thing is that I'm not just selling these broccoli plants for their heads. I'm also selling them for their leaves. So right here, you can see a developing head. And this plant looked pristine 2 days ago when I took a picture of it. And now it's been eaten up by these caterpillars. But these leaves are also edible and usable in all kinds of things that you would use brassica leaves like kale, collards, and turnips for. You can cook them down, chop them up, throw them in soups and sauces. You can turn them into green cubes. Okay, here's the white moth I want to show you. That is the problem right there. And like I said, normally I have these things covered up. But I'm in here today trying to clean out. So that's the moth that we don't want in here. That's trying to lay eggs. But anyway, back to what I was saying is that these leaves are edible, and I want to be able to collect and harvest these leaves to be able to sell to CSA customers. Come on out here. So I'm trying to keep these leaves pristine, and so I can only harvest the ones that haven't been eaten by the caterpillars. So that is unfortunate. I won't be able to sell those, but we'll probably just be able to use those in our family. So here is a caterpillar, one of the green cabbage moths that is actually, or cabbage worms that is actually in chrysalis form. So these are the ones that I think are actually hatching into the moths that I'm finding inside the tarp. So I'm going to take this guy off. He's way harder, like, there we go, firmer than the actual worms. That's how I know it's a chrysalis. And unfortunately that guy is going. So again, that's just the battle with gardening organic, is learning how to get rid of these pests without, using harsh chemicals. I will say it's a lot more work, and we're still fine tuning our systems. Next year, I think we'll have a better system with these tarps and not have to battle the cabbage worms that we're doing. And right now I'm battling another one of our pests, a beloved pest, the kitty cat, who wants to hide down in between the cabbage plants. So I've got to pull her out and then get this thing covered and hope to keep anything else from getting in here today. And lastly, I'm going to show you the cabbages here, which are looking really awesome. These took a beating from some cabbage worms earlier in the season, but I feel like I was able to get them pretty much under control. This is a huge Savoy cabbage, which is just so fun to look at. And I'm not going to take the cover off because I'm trying to keep the bugs out, right? But I think you can see through the netting how pretty these are. These are the red acre, purplish red cabbages here. And then coming down here, we've got the early Jersey green cabbages, and they're starting to form their head, which is really exciting. So they made it through. There's some beaten up leaves there, but they're starting to form their heads, which is awesome, as that means here in the next few weeks I'll be able to harvest these. So these got through the season. I left one out here for the bugs to get to. Maybe they would leave these alone. And here's the cat again, sleeping on my burperium, my flower plants here. See, what are you doing? You're sleeping on my flowers. Can you find a different spot? Mercy. Yeah, so the cabbages are looking good and they're coming along. And they go all the way down the row here to the Savoy cabbages, more red acre. There's another early Jersey. Some of these got mixed in because I lost some and had to replace them. And then down here, I've got some purple cauliflower mixed in here with some other red acre cabbages. So that row is coming in really nice. This is my cut flower garden, or at least one of them. You're looking at amaranth here. I've got 4 different kinds of amaranth, and those things took off really fast. We've got bachelor buttons, different kinds of celosia, cosmos, snapdragons, black-eyed Susans or Rebecca, more cosmos, and I took a big harvest from this garden yesterday. We've got some calendula, different kinds of calendula coming in here, some ornamental grasses. Aren't those pretty? So fun. Bachelor buttons, and then these are the cool season crops that I planted kind of later in the season, like late, I'd say mid spring. So we've got love in the mist, we've got giant poppies, corn cockle here, boy, I'm blanking, feverfew, more corn cockle, love in a mist down inside here. So these are all starting to flower, and that's really fun to kind of watch this thing produce. And then over here we've got beets and beet greens, and those are really coming up. I'm starting to form their heads. They've had beautiful leaves, and thankfully the rabbits have left them alone. But I see right now that something has gotten here and eaten my kale, so I'm gonna have to check this out. So actually these are my rutabagas that I'm noticing this caterpillar damage on, and it's the same exact caterpillars I found on the broccolis, and rutabaga is a brassica, so that's no surprise. So because so many of these leaves are affected and I cannot pull all these plants, I am having to come in here and spray with BT. So I'm spraying and I'm squishing as I see like bigger caterpillars like that one. But I want to show you in here, these things are really close to being ready to harvest. You see all that purple in there? So I really want to protect these and make sure that, you know, I get my crop, because there's a really nice crop inside of here. So, you know, it's just maintenance. You guys coming out here and checking things as daily or as often as possible, because this happened within like 24 to 48 hours. These leaves did not look like this a few days ago, and that's how fast they attack. And you can see that these leaves look really nice and green, and then these are speckled with holes. So they just get in here and they hatch and they go to town really quickly. So, life of a farmer. And so really, other than that, I'm just, like I said, I have to mediate these problems by being out here, by looking at my plants. I just absolutely cannot ignore it, because something like this happens so fast. A lot of times I'm squishing things, pulling things off. I use insecticidal soap, which is basically like Dawn dish soap with water added. And a lot of times that'll take care of some of these pests like aphids and flea beetles. But when it comes to these caterpillars, they're a lot harder to get rid of. And a lot of times it's either squishing them, pulling them off, spraying BT, or just ripping the whole plant out, which is unfortunate. So I'm going to try to get these at bay and see if I can't save this crop, because we're really close to harvest. I've got kale here next to it, which caterpillars like really well. And so far they've kind of been eating more of the rutabaga greens and less of the kale greens. So in a way that's good, because the kale leaves are obviously what my goal is. I'm looking for roots over here on the rutabaga, not so much the leaves. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm out here remediating issues before it gets too hot. We've pulled the garlic, and that is curing. So now I've got to maintain that garlic bed, get some cover crops in there or some compost, and get ready to use that for something else. Haven't decided what yet. Everything else is growing really well. I know that I'll be out here looking for squash bugs here soon, and the good old horned caterpillar on my tomatoes, and who knows what else. But I'll try to get out here as much as I can and record some videos. We're pretty busy. It's hard to do this, but that's what's going on right now. We're definitely getting into the warm, if not hot season, and things are really starting to take off. So thanks for joining me today. Leave your comments, questions, how you like to remediate these problems naturally below. And as always, I'm Landon Gilfillan with Little Pine Farm, formerly Pepper and Pine Garden Design, growing gardeners and their gardens. And we'll see you in the next video.